Hello, guys, for the Vamily show. This is number 23, and I have the Sean Cuddy from the Room 9 podcast with me today, which is awesome because for the first time ever, I'm going to be able to say in the audio, and for those that are listening on the podcast, because I actually have the podcast version going now, and the links will be there for that, so you guys can check it out. And also your links for room9podcast.com and the YouTube channel, because you have a YouTube channel up for your podcast as well. I'll have that in there. And we have Bake a Leg and Let's Dig It in here, Bob the Raptor and Joe, RV Weekends, Wyville Family Adventures. We'll have other people coming in as we get going here. Um, I came across you because you were on Tea with Gary V, which I just found Gary V recently. Um, and he's a really good person to listen to keep your mental your mental thought process positive, at least for me anyway. Um, who are some people that you do? Because I was listening to your podcast. I think it was episode 65, and you're talking about self pity mode in there. Like, who are some people that you listen to stay out of that self pity mode?
Oh, geez. Well, a lot of it, I've always been kind of fascinated with psychology and personal development. And I've dug in probably in my mid 20s. I'm 34 now. So, yeah, around my mid 20s, I really dove into philosophy and psychology. And it kind of brought me into that stage of working on myself. The best way to help the universe, the best way to help the world, the best way to help anybody is to work on yourself, because really that's the only thing you can change. It's the only thing you have potential to change is yourself. But I lived in self-pity for so long, everything. When my brother and sister died, I was 15, and I think I just kind of used that as an excuse to not work hard for anything. Like, the world owes me now. And I had that attitude for such a long time. And I guess I would say the things that brought me out of that, some of the people, some of the influences, I really have been into like some old timers, people like Alan Watts. He's one of my favorites. Carl Jung is a great one. But as far as modern people, I am, Gary V. I have trouble sometimes because, you listen to somebody like Gary V and you're pumped for a little bit, you're pumped
Mm,
maybe even for a couple days, but it fades, any kind of motivational thing fades. And that was a part of my life forever. I'd listen to somebody and be influenced and be pumped up. All right, I can do this. I can do this. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, for me, it was, if I don't learn to get out of self pity, if I don't learn to love myself, if I don't learn to accept myself and have confidence in my ability to fail and learn from those failures, I can listen to all the stuff I want all day, but it doesn't allow me to apply anything to my life. And you can
right.
have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't have application, it doesn't really do you any good. And that's kind of what I really narrowed myself down to recently was, all right, how do I apply all this stuff that I know? So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many incredible people out there you can listen to, so many people doing awesome things. But I think when it comes down to it, at least for me, it was, how do I apply this and how do I obtain the self love and acceptance I need to move forward?
Right. And I think, I mean, I would say that when it fades, it's not so much it fades, but I would say it's probably still in your mind, because
Hmm.
if you and when you're talking about the self-love part, like, until I started loving myself and all that, I couldn't take in those motivational messages or anything. I didn't believe in it. I'm like, whatever, you can't, my circumstances suck and all that kind of stuff, like you're saying, the self-pity mode. And um and so you can't take in any of it, no little pieces of it can get through. um and I was listening on there. I mean, your brother and sister dying, and I lost my parents both by the age of 25. And so that always affected me because, you know, I had friends that still had their parents and stuff like that. So it was like you guys kind of still have a safety net. You know what I mean? You if something doesn't work out, well, I can go still go hang out with mom and dad. And your life and your thought process changes when that's not there anymore.
Mm.
You have to make stuff happen because that's not an option to have happen anymore. Um, and and so that affected me in that way and kind of and made me have a really hard time trusting people because it's like my parents who I trusted more than anybody are gone, and I don't want to necessarily have that and then lose that. So dealing with that loss, I was angry for a long time, and I was listening in your episode about using drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff to escape it. Um, and then I learned in therapy, as self medicating the depression and all that kind of stuff. That's basically all you're doing is trying to get past it that way. Um, what was the moment that made you realize and stop? Because I after I got in trouble the second time and got arrested for getting in fights, that's when I was like, hey man, if you keep doing this, you're not going to come out. You're not going to be so lucky and be able to get out. So you better straighten up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was when I was sitting in jail as well. I think it kind of, I can't really explain. It's sometimes it's hard to put into words, but it was just this moment where I really was like, okay, I've been going down this one road my whole life. It has gotten me nowhere. I have really accomplished nothing in my life, to be quite frank. Yeah, I barely graduated high school. I didn't go to college. I was working right out of high school and I didn't really obtain anything. I always had these great creative ideas and I would start them. And as soon as it got tough, I would give up. And again, I think it goes back to that the world owes me something. I shouldn't have to work hard for it. And I mean, it just kind of happened. I just made the decision like I have to at least attempt this.
Mm-hmm.
I have to at least find a way to try the other path because obviously this one is getting me nowhere. And it really started for me was just I really started watching myself almost as if I was a complete stranger, like just kind of observing how I react to something. What do I do? What am I thinking? And as soon as I developed that habit, I realized that I talked to myself like I was the biggest piece of crap ever. And that's where I started. I just found catch myself talking to myself negatively and I would stop and try to switch that to positivity. And it really is the poster child of fake it till you make it because that's really what I was doing. I was just all right. I'm going to pretend that I have confidence. I'm going to pretend I'm not, in fear about everything. I'm going to pretend that I love myself, and eventually it started happening. And you almost physiologically, literally feel the change. And
Yeah.
it's a very hard thing to explain, but it was amazing to, and it's still, I still have to work on my confidence. I still have
Mm.
to work on my self love. I don't think it's something you ever obtain completely because it's easy to slip up and slide back into that self pity.
Oh yeah. You always have to be on the lookout for that happening. Um, to because now that I know, like, since I've been in the depression and try to take my own life at one point and all that kind of stuff, now I know when my thinking process starts to go that way, and I'm able to stop myself. But that's a big part of, like you're saying, is being able to stop that spiral because once you can recognize it, then it's easy
Hmm.
to stay on top of it. But until you recognize it, it's really hard. And the podcast you started, you're saying you started about 2 years ago, and it's about mental health and everything. Um, why did you decide to start talking about that? Because I know for me, it's just therapeutic for me to talk about all this stuff because you feel kind of ashamed about it in a weird way once I started talking about it, it was really therapeutic for me. So I don't know how it's been for you to be talking about this kind of stuff with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's nothing better, I don't think, than talking about what you're going through, what you're struggling with. It's amazing, even when you're by yourself, what saying something out loud can do for you. And there's this clinical psychologist I really like, and he just talks about naming what you want to change. I mean, that's the first step to anything. You can't change something unless you know what it is. So saying it out loud is one of the greatest things you can do, and it's different even when you're alone to say it out loud as opposed to thinking it and saying it in your head. It's sometimes just saying, hey, I'm struggling with this alone in your room can be a big help. Not to mention if you're talking to a family member or a friend, or not to mention if you're shouting it to the whole world. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
that just it makes it easier. It gets you more comfortable. And it's at first very scary to say stuff out loud, but it becomes a very useful tool. There's this kid's story, kid's book that I love. I think the author name was Jack Kent, and it's called crap. I'm drawing a brain fart on the book. Oh, there's no such thing as dragons. It's called, and it's basically this kid has a dragon about the size of a cat, and he wakes up and it's on his bed, and he goes tell his mom, and his mom says there's no such thing as dragons, and the dragon gets bigger. And then the kid, the dragon eats the kid's pancakes, and the kid tells his mom, and his mom says there's no such thing as dragons, and the dragon keeps getting bigger and bigger, and the more the mom denies it, the bigger the dragon gets, and eventually it takes the house off. And the dad comes home and is like, what is going on? And she's like, I don't know. And the father's like, well, there's a dragon in the house, and the dragon gets smaller. And I always love that, because the more you talk about something, the smaller it gets, the less heavier it is. And you don't
Mm-hmm.
need an answer half the time. You don't need somebody to give you a solution. You just need somebody to listen. And just saying it,
Yeah.
I think, is the biggest step.
Yeah. And having empathy with somebody is huge too. Um, and you don't realize that empathy also is a two-way street. Like when people can empathize with you, it also helps you out just as much as you if you can empathize with somebody else what they're
Mm-hmm.
going through. And it's kind of all those little things that you learn um, as you start to love yourself. You can start to love others better. And I found it funny because me and you are close to the same age. I'm 37, and you were talking about having a wife and an ex-wife really quick, and mine was high school sweetheart, and it's learning over the years that it was more. I always had a desire just to want to have that happy family, and anything that anybody that would love me latch on to, even if it's maybe not the right person for you. So that's what I learned from mine. I mean, what did you learn from your quick marriage?
Oh, man. How much time do we have?
Oh, got a little
uh,
bit, that's for sure.
I would say, there's so much I learned from my relationship with my now ex-wife. But I think one of the biggest things it made me look at all my relationships and just relationships in general. And it's interesting because I feel like when you love somebody unconditionally, and I think this is the biggest lesson I took out of my divorce, was what unconditional love truly is. And what unconditional love truly is, you know what? I love you. I care about you. And although you don't want to be with me, I hope you're happy somewhere else. And yes, this hurts. This is painful, but I should be able to let you go and be happy. And I
Yeah.
think that is one of the biggest things in the world that we have. You see in all relationships when they break up, we're so angry and mad, and we forget about every good moment we've had with that person, and we want to ruin their lives. And it made me realize how selfish love can be. This
Hmm.
this sense of, all right, if I love you, if you stay with me, I love you if you do everything I want you to do. And to me, there's nothing more wasteful and empty than that kind of love. And I think, I don't even know if I would call it love, but it becomes very heavy. And I learned that very quickly. how all of us are in relationships. And you have to think, I put myself in a position, what if I have a wonderful girlfriend I've been with for almost 7 years now, and I really would like to think if she decided to move on, as much as that would hurt and be painful, I could do that and allow her to be happy, because her happiness should be more important to me than us being together.
Mhm. Yeah, it's that one's really hard to learn.
Yes, it
That
is.
one's a hard lesson to learn. That one's a hard lesson to learn for sure. Um, and one of the things that I did after this relationship was over, I really took a look at myself and I reached out to basically any ex I ever had and just apologize for any of the stuff I did. And I'm like, I just want to if next time I start a relationship with anybody, I just want to do it with a clean slate in my head and just and because I can't change anything in the past, but I can apologize for what happened, and that's where I have to leave that. So, and Melnetti living free zip codes says shouldn't be ifs. That's true. Shouldn't be, but it's not how it all works. You've talked to a lot of different people on your podcast. Who have been some people that have been like really interesting that you've been, I mean, that you've just been really entertained by talking to?
Yeah, I would say honestly, I love, and I struggle sometimes to get these kind of people on. Yeah, I don't know what it is. It kind of makes me want to pull my hair out sometimes, but I really love the people who have been through it and have come out on top
Mm-hmm.
and have found ways to overcome and ways to live with the challenges that they are struggling with, whether it was mental health, whether it was depression, anxiety, whether it's substance use or addiction problem. I mean, we all have different ways that we have found to overcome what we're struggling with, or at least looking to find ways to overcome what we're struggling with. And I love hearing about that. I mean, I think we're all,
Mm-hmm.
as human beings, I feel like we're all suckers for stories, and we love that
Yeah.
story. And that's the best way to connect. That's the best way to learn. And I just love hearing how people have, I talked to a kid, it was probably earlier on in my episodes, but I mean, he was kidnapped for I think 3 weeks when he was about 12 or 13 by some neighbors, and his parents had no idea. They were looking for him, and he had to jump out of this second story and broke his leg, and luckily and somebody else saw him when he was kind of crawling around. I mean, the things they did to him, like, my heart broke. But to hear where he was today, to hear how he found ways to overcome what has happened to him, I think was the super impressive. And we hear other people's stories like that, and I was like, man, I shouldn't even be talking about my story after a story like that. But we
Right.
all we all have awesome stories, no matter what. And I think to us, our stories seem bland because we're constantly watching them over and over again. But I
Right.
think to become comfortable with sharing your story, I think, is the most exciting thing anybody can do, because we all have something in our lives that we have gone through, that we have overcome, that we have found ways to overcome it. And I think it's amazing. And that's really the whole point of what I want to do, is just start really collecting stories. So I would say, just in general, people who who have struggled with mental health or addiction and have found ways to live with it and overcome it.
Yeah. It's um if if you ever want to have me on your show, I got stories for days, but um it's
We'll get you on.
it's well, thank you. It's really interesting what you're saying, the stories from people, and you never know how that story can help somebody else. Uh, it's really surprising, like little comments that you make, like I make in my videos sometimes, how they can affect people, and how just how words can, like you're saying, when you get in that self pity, you got to do the self love and the positivity messages, keep yourself going. Your words can have an effect on other people too, so profoundly. Like
Mm.
when I've talked to people that started businesses and they started it because somebody said, "Oh, that's a good idea," or "That's a good thing that you made," or whatever, and now their life's in a completely different direction. So you can not only affect positivity in yourself, you can affect positivity in the world. And part of the thing is sharing stories. So hearing you say you love to share stories, that's one of the things that I love to do on here is just talk to people and learn their stories. And it was really cool to learn about your background and all the stuff you've been to, and then to see you've been working at your podcast, and now and then I you pop up on Tea with Gary Vee. That's what I'm saying. Like you just little things in life, you never know what's going to happen, and that's where I contacted you off of after I saw you on there because of that story. What has kept you going? Because I'm sure when you started your podcast, the first couple of episodes, maybe you were kind of a little disappointed, or um, you wanted success a little more quickly or something like that. How do you keep yourself going through the negativity that creeps up on that part of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say for me, it was a kind of going back to what we originally talked about and developing that self love and that confidence. For me, that was the key to it all because now I know that I can push through anything. So now I'm looking at every failure as an awesome, amazing opportunity for me because when you screw something up, when I re-listen to a podcast, oh, okay, I screwed up there, I screwed up here, I screwed up
Mm-hmm.
there. It's just a beautiful learning lesson. It helps you learn so much so quickly. And I don't know, I'm on fire, man. I have found my passion. I have
Mm-hmm.
found I have found something where I can be very technical and scientific mixed with the perfect amount of creativity. And I mean, I have crazy ambitions, that's for sure. Where I want to go and where I want to take things. And I just again, I think it just really it started with I mean, I knew nothing about podcasting. Had no idea how to record audio. Same thing with video, same thing with graphic design, same thing with, special effects or even creating a lower third for your video. Like I had no idea how to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, you can, if you have the time and the will and the passion, you can learn anything you want
Oh
nowadays,
yeah.
which is what's amazing about it. And you just got to push through it. I mean, I think that's the thing they don't ever really talk to you about when you start a business or start a project is, how to get through those lull kind of times. And I mean, for me, it was just, all right, I'm just going to keep going. I have not slowed down at all in 2 years. I've been waiting. I was waiting because usually my pattern would be I'd start something creative and awesome. And it's like I said, as soon as it got hard, a few weeks into it, I'd be like, never mind. And,
Yeah.
that motivation, that fire would just kind of burn out and fade away. And it's been, like I said, over about 2 years. And I'm ready to keep learning. There's so much to learn. And I think that's what makes it exciting. A lot of people, I think, get the idea when they realize how little they actually know about something they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Some people get down about that, but for me, it was just exciting because I'm young. I'm only 34. I guess I'll be 35 in a few weeks, but I mean, I have so many years to learn and keep growing, and for me, that's super exciting to know that there's all this knowledge out there. I have many more failures to come to learn from, and it makes me excited now. I mean, I can't really, I guess, explain how that essentially happened, but it's
Right.
been quite the ride. That's for sure. The last couple of years.
Right. Well, I feel you there. Like, um, I have a fire for this, and like every time that I think it's going to slow down, something else happens, and it ends up getting uh, more fire on it. But I really enjoy doing it because people that have left comments and all that kind of stuff on videos, and it just helps motivate me more. And kind of along that, Wyville Family Adventures wants to know: Has there been one person that you have helped that made it seem like all the trials and struggles that you've been so through so far were worth it, all because just that one person got help.
I mean, that's for me, that's every single person who reaches out to me. But to kind of really answer that question, I've always tell people, I love helping people. That's my main purpose. That's my main goal of doing this. But out of everything, it helps me. And I think,
Right.
failing and getting up, and when somebody like you reached out to me, and I mean, there's a ton of message that people are reaching out to me more recently, and it just, I mean, I think it's awesome to establish those connections with people, to say, hey,
Hmm.
thanks for being willing to share your story. And somebody said, I mean, that means the world to me. It's never been about money. I'm trying to make a little more money so I don't have to worry about bills and food and stuff. But I mean, for me, it's never about money. It's about doing something that I don't open my eyes every morning and I'm like, damn it, I have to go do this. I don't want to.
Right. Right.
And and that was always it for me. You can give me friggin' $40,000 a year to do what I'm doing, and I'm a happy camper.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, oh, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, this is the first thing that I've ever done where I didn't wake up in the morning and go, oh, I got to go to work. Like, I get
Hmm.
up earlier than I ever have in my life, just on my own, and I'm happy to get and start doing this stuff every day. Like, get answering emails and even all the little tedious stuff. Um, it's it's really joyful,
Hmm.
which is weird, which is weird. When you work, like you're saying, you worked right out of high school. I was working in high school. Like as soon as I could get a job, I was out there working. So um, you know, my grades weren't good because I didn't have time to do the homework anyway. So I'm right there with you on that too. So I kind of like want to go around and talk to kids and be like, look, just because you're not doing good in school now, don't let that define you the rest of your life. You know, you can still make something of yourself even if your grades aren't good right now. You know, it's it's about learning about life. You
Hmm.
know, that's what I think. I think a lot of people think it's the first 18 years is learning, but no, you got to learn your whole life. You got to learn your whole life. And you said one of the things that you got formed when you lost your brother and sister was um, just not giving a crap. Like life's too short to give a crap what everybody else thinks and does.
Yeah, it's that was. So I think the episode you must have listened to was, I think, like the biggest challenges of my life and what I learned from
Yeah,
them. Yeah,
yeah.
and that was definitely, obviously, one of the biggest challenges of my life, and it immediately made you stop sweating the small crap. Like, who cares? I mean, I see grown ass people make the biggest deal out of some childish, stupid thing. Oh, she said this, or he said that, or he did that, and it brought me to forgive people very
Hmm.
quickly. It brought me to accepting people very quickly. It brought me to telling my good buddies, grown men, "Hey, I love you, dude." I mean,
Hmm.
it brought so much, because you knew life could be taken from you, or this person could be taken from you at any moment. And one of the biggest things that was difficult for me is my brother and I, we had bunk beds. And I remember vividly that he was going to visit my sister out in Arizona, and that's where they had their car accident and died. And I just remember I was on the top bunk and he was packing. And I remember something told me, just say, "Hey, I love you, bro." And I didn't say it. And I remember that hung with me for a while, because that was my last opportunity to ever say that to him, and I
Yeah.
didn't say that, and that brought me to saying it to everybody, no matter what. And I think it's important when you're pissed off at somebody that you love over something stupid, over $10 they owe you, over them breaking your favorite pair of glasses or whatever. It's like, who cares? They're
Hmm.
there with you. And I think that's what we have to remind ourselves. again, going back to when we're with something so much, we become so used to it and we take it
Yeah,
for granted. And that just made me take nobody and nothing for granted.
yeah. I'm. It's funny when you say that because that's the thing that I told myself. You know, when my dad died, and I changed that too. Was I always wish that I could tell him that I loved him one more time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and ever since that happened, I've done the same thing. Like, I always try to make it a point to say I love you to everybody. So, um, yeah. And they're talking about in here jobs they had when they were younger. Vicky, her first was 14-year-old working as a carny.
That's great.
And then let's see, Kristen's World Outdoors. She was 16 working as a car hop, had to skate to make the extra 50 cents an hour. Oh man, that's one thing. Um, and hello, Willow Grove. How are you, man? How are you? The um, you hear people talk about supply and demand all the time, and you have a limited supply of time. And think about all the times in your life that you sell it for cheap. You're never going to
Mm,
get that hour back, and you sold it for $5 to somebody, or $7 to somebody, or whatever it is at the time. And really think about that. Um, I you got I started really thinking about that and started valuing myself and be like, well, instead of selling, if I'm going to sell my time for cheap, I'd rather sell my time for cheap to myself than to somebody else. And that's how I started looking at it. Um, I don't know what you're because you were like you're saying you're happy. Like what kind of jobs did you have in the past where you know that this is way better than doing some of those ones?
Oh, I worked in a kitchen the majority of my life. From started at a pizzeria and ended in fine dining. But I've always loved cooking. I love the art of it. I love, there's a lot that goes into it that I enjoy. It was the the crappy pay for working your ass off constantly, no
Hmm.
benefits. You get walked all over. I mean, there's nothing there. You got to work the most important family time hours. You got to work holidays. I mean, you're
Yeah,
constantly working, and it's tough to really go somewhere. And so, I mean, I've spent most of my life doing that, but I just always felt this void, and so I had one other job, and that was working for in like an area rug company where they sold area rugs to the area that I live in. And so I switched to that job thinking, oh, maybe this will help. It's Monday through Friday, 7 to
yeah,
5. I get vacations, I get paid time, I can get health insurance, I can get all this. And I got weekends with my girlfriend and nothing. It was just still just emptiness. I always felt like I had this thing in my gut. It's like, you are not doing what you could potentially be doing with the potential you have. And I could literally feel that in my gut, that void of, all right, something's missing.
yeah, yeah. It's but you don't realize it at the time, like what that gut feeling is in your gut either. Like at least I didn't.
Hmm.
Like it was just feeling of like unease and just and
Anxiety.
yeah, yeah, and like you're saying, even you get to the jobs where you have vacation time and all that kind of stuff, and you're like, feel like, okay, now I'll be satisfied because I have the job that has all those things, and you're still not, and you're kind of wondering what's going on, and you're right, it's realizing that you have more potential than just punching a clock,
Hmm.
5 days a week, hoping, waiting for the weekend to come so that you can actually enjoy the time you're spending in your life.
Yeah, that was definitely something I had going on for many years, and I'm very grateful to have rid myself of it.
Yeah, well, it was good training though for what you're doing now. I mean, working in the food business and all that kind of stuff, you've got to be able to deal with and talk to people from a lot of different
Hmm.
backgrounds and get along and all that kind of stuff. So, in a way, I think it was kind of training for you doing your podcast.
Yeah, with a lot more swearing, that's for sure.
Right, right. What when you look back, because I talked with a lot of people here on YouTube, and we all hate like our first videos. Um, do you have like those first podcasts where you're like, oh man, I really was doing
Oh
this
yeah.
too much, or I was doing that too much?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, my first two episodes again, I had no idea what I was doing. I remember it took me almost a week to edit those first like handful of podcasts because literally had no idea what I was doing. So everything I had to kind of look up online and all right, what do I do? How do I even begin? And
Mm-hmm.
so they're absolutely terrible. Some of the podcasts, absolutely
Right.
terrible. And you can slowly, if you listen to them, those first few, and then you can kind of hear when I got some better microphones and started to learn better techniques on, how to do it, how much volume should I have, and so on and so forth. Now all the way up to now, and I mean, I still again have so much to learn when it comes to recording and editing and removing background. And, I'd like to work on the whole studio and get that more soundproof. I mean, there's so much to keep going, keep learning. I mean, video for sure, still for sure. That's something I'm fairly new to. It's been about maybe a 6 month process, very many hours over the last 6 months going into it. But again, it's just
Yeah.
like, oh, why did I do that? That's terrible. And
Yeah.
I find it encouraging too, though, to look back and listen to those and watch those old things
Mm-hmm.
because you can be reminded how far you've come. Again,
Yeah.
when we're with ourselves every day in and day out, you don't see the growth you're having. And I think when you start looking back in your past and all right, well, listen to this, look at how far you've come. I think that can be very encouraging.
Yeah. It's it's I say all the time it's about perspective, the
Mhm.
forest for the tree, you can't, if it's sitting there right in front of you. Yeah, looking back on that stuff, it really it really can um give you that perspective to say, hey, I don't suck as bad as I used to. But I tell everybody here, like, if you're worried that you're gonna suck when you start, you're gonna suck when you start. Everybody sucks when they start.
Mhm.
You know, there's very few people that are just so natural in anything that they look like pros. It's just gonna suck. So just get the sucky part over with and start putting it out. Because until you get to practice and get better, yeah, it's like anything. Um, what has been some of the best nuggets, like the guests that you've had, like some of the nuggets you picked up from them that you've taken and applied in your own life?
Oh, that's a good one too. I would say, I mean, a lot of it is, I think, is stemmed from really networking and connecting with people, and then being able to reconnect with those people after I've had my initial conversation with them. Whether it was somebody who is a therapist, for instance, that
Mm-hmm.
specialize in PTSD. I think stuff like that. I was able to either connect other people with certain people when they've had struggles and challenges because you end up establishing that kind of friendship and relationship with people. And even for myself, when I've struggled with certain things, I've been able to call people up and kind of get their advice on things. And it's really, I've almost kind of connected, I don't want to say family, but I guess you can use that word, family, and really have been able
Mm-hmm.
to connect with a lot of people, especially even in my area. Because to be quite honest, I think remote podcasting didn't start until I avoided it because again, the sound quality is never good enough when you're doing remotely. But I was
Right.
missing out on so many guests, and so I think probably like 8 months ago, I was like, all right, I have to do more remote podcasts. And COVID really brought that upon me too because nobody
Right.
wants to do a podcast in person anymore. But it's
Yeah.
just it was really just finding those connections, and then oh wait, I'm struggling with this. I know this person who actually specializes in that, and you can have that conversation with them.
Yeah, that having those connections is really awesome, and it's cool once I talk to somebody or whatever, I can take in their content in a different way than I did before, too. Just because of having that connection with them. Um, what it what has been like? What has been the most surprising thing that has happened as far as your show goes? Um, either somebody that reached out to you that was surprising, like that you're surprised that it's a listener, maybe somebody you listen to, or just somebody that you're really blown away would listen to your podcast.
Yeah, well, I guess Gary Vaynerchuk coming on my podcast in a few weeks is a pretty big one that I
Yeah.
wasn't expecting. But I mean, there's a couple of authors that I've talked with that I think have been pretty amazing that have actually reached out to me and said they've listened to the show. And Dr. Sally Satel, she's really specializes in addiction, and
Hmm.
she reached out to me, and that was humbling. If you feel blessed, and honestly, I think it's not even a specific name. It's the people in general, I think, who reach out to me. I think it's awesome because you don't realize a lot of times how many people are listening to you and want to connect with you and want to share their story. And to me, it's just the whole process is humbling, and I feel very blessed to be heading in the direction I'm heading in and be able to really connect with people. I think that's, I mean, what else could we ask for as human beings other than to be able to, hey, I'm just gonna sit down and record my thoughts and put it out there to the world, and it helps people and it connects you with people. And I mean, people from all different places around the world, people from all different personalities. It doesn't matter. There's always somebody there who can relate to you and you connect with them. And I think that has been the most badass thing that about doing the whole Room 9 thing was just all the amazing people I'm connecting with, whether they're CEOs or they're just people who are in AA or NA or just struggling with anxiety on a daily basis. There's so many people out there who can be helped by just hearing your story.
Yeah. And having that diverse amount of people that you talk to, because I'm having that now, you start to realize how alike all people are. How all people want love, how all people, want connection, want to talk, no matter where they're at in life. Like you're saying, the CEO or people in rehab, down, you know, to barely hanging on. There's something that is very gratifying about knowing how similar everybody is.
Yet similar and yet so different, which is
Hmm.
strange too, because I've always said I can tell you exactly how I've overcome my things, but that could be completely different for you. And I mean,
Yeah.
a great example of that is, I mean, recovery from addiction, from a drug, because you have AA, you have NA, and there's so many different pathways of recovery. And like AA and NA were something that never did it for me, but I've seen that
Hmm.
transform people's lives. But I think what's important about sharing your story as well is, but a piece of what worked for you might work for me. I mean, it ain't going to
Yep.
be the exact same way, but I could maybe learn something that you did that might help me and might work with me. And it is, we're so much alike, but yet we're so different at the same time. And it's funny how that kind of balances things out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, besides Gary Vee, who's going to be on your show, who's some other people that you'd love to talk to one day?
Oh man, there's a ton of celebrities out there that are in recovery. I'm trying to think who else. Jason Bateman's a big one. I remember seeing he was in recovery. I was like, oh, I should try to get Jason Bateman on the show.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's so
I
many, man. I mean, there's so many people out there. There's a huge list of people who are struggling with mental health, and yeah, I find more and more every day. People are, I
Right.
feel, slowly starting to come out and be like, you know what, I'm going to talk about this because that's what it is. No matter whether you're Bradley Cooper or whether you're me, it doesn't matter. Sharing your story is so important and can help so many
Mhm.
people. And to me, I mean, honestly, Gary Vee coming on the show and we'll talk about mental health, and that'll give me a lot more exposure, which means I can
Mhm.
connect and help a lot more people. And that's great. But other than that, I have no more excitement, about talking with him and talking about mental health than I did anybody else on my show. I mean, it's a great
Yeah.
opportunity. It's a great for my business and all of that to grow and expand. But I mean, it doesn't feel any different to me, essentially, because it's the same thing. His story with mental health is no better or worse than your story or my
Mhm.
story or anybody else's story. It doesn't make a difference. We're all struggling. We're all trying to connect. We're all trying to heal. We're all trying to improve ourselves. And talking
Yeah.
about it, as we mentioned earlier, is one of the greatest ways to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're saying about um, excited, I've had people ask me, well, don't you get nervous talking to people? I'm like, no, I don't get nervous talking. I get nervous about them showing up. That's about the only thing I get
Oh,
nervous
yeah.
about. Is are they going to show up? Other than that, I don't get nervous because they're all just people, and it's getting to that nugget of who they are as people, and figuring that out. That's really interesting to me. Like
Hmm.
that's the interesting part to me is getting that story from people. Um, so, what's the story of then the initial idea to start the podcast? Like, were you just thinking to yourself, "Oh, maybe I should start a podcast," or did you just somebody suggest it to you? Like, how did it all begin?
Well, I've always loved podcasts. Probably, I mean, since what 2007, 2008. I think I started listening to podcasts. So I've always had a thing for them. I've always loved them. I've always enjoyed them. And then obviously when I was in rehab, which was in room number 9, my roommate and I would always, we'd have to be back in our rooms at 11 o'clock or whatever. And we'd always go back there and talk every night, like about our shit, about the stuff we're trying to overcome, about the stuff we're trying to work on in ourselves. And eventually I was just like, we were laying there, we were each on our own beds, and we were like, I was like, dude, we should just do a podcast and talk about this shit. And I mean, that's what we did. We started
Mm-hmm.
just kind of dude, it really all started for fun and just an excuse to get together and drink some energy drinks and smoke cigarettes. And it formed from there. It kind of had a grassroots growing in my area in Buffalo, New York, and slowly started picking up some steam. He cut out about, I would say, probably a month or two in. He got a construction job, and I mean, because I was all about it. I'm like every day, all right, how am I going to grow
Mm-hmm.
and work this and do this? And I was putting it all in, and he would just show up and sit down with me, and we would just record a podcast. So eventually, he was
Right.
just like, I don't have the time to do it anymore. He didn't stick with it. So it was me. I was by myself doing it. I guess technically, still am, running everything by myself. But yeah, that was, yeah, what, 2 years ago? I said, yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny how things change over time like that too. Like with doing content creation, how it morphs over time. And I think
Hmm.
I think you kind of have to have it evolve too, because your life changes over time too. So if you can't morph your content to that, then you're kind of up a creek as far as that goes.
Yeah, yeah, you get stuck. You definitely have to. I would never thought I would have fallen in love with video production and graphic design either, which is
Mm-hmm.
something very shocking. That it was just, and that kind of happened too. I mean, that all happened a few months, probably, like I said, 6 months ago. And it just
Yeah.
kind of, I got a grant, and I was like, I was going to spend it to kind of build up the podcast, maybe do some advertising on it. And again, that gut feeling was like, get some video stuff, start doing video.
Yeah.
And, so that kind of just formed into that too. So yeah, it is amazing how that happens.
Yeah, and you gotta trust those gut feelings a lot. You gotta trust them,
Hmm.
and and listen to them because there's something about them that, and it's strange how your mind works. Like you said, you go down in those holes, like how, the psychology of how your gut, that your subconscious is able to pick up on things like that is
Yeah,
really intriguing. It's really
that's
intriguing.
that's one of the most difficult things I think to do is to how do you decipher when it's your intuition or when it's you overthinking something.
Hmm.
And I mean, I've been trying to figure that out for many, many years because that's a hard skill, a very hard skill to get great at. Because, it happens and then it only takes the tiniest bit for it not to be your intuition anymore and for you to overthink it and manipulate it into what you think it should be. And it's
Yeah,
very easy to do. And that is something I still am terrible at trying to get better. But every time I have known it was my gut and I have followed it, it has never steered me wrong. It's a very strange phenomenon for sure.
yeah, yeah. I'll tell you one place where you can learn about it and learn to hone it a little bit better is playing poker.
That's a great example of that
Yeah,
could get you better with that. Yeah.
yeah. The player, it's so strange. Like when you really go into that, like people really don't think that much about poker players as far as a mental game, but it really is. You're
Oh,
trying
it's
to
all. I
use
think it's all
psychology on the other
psychological.
people. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's really incredible. Like if you're really good at that part of the game, it doesn't matter if you know numbers and all that kind of stuff. If you're really good at the psychological part of it, you can do very
Hmm.
well at poker. Um, yeah, and um, who is somebody that you look to for advice now that you started this and made connections? Like who's somebody that in the podcasting world or in the interviewing world that you kind of look to get advice from now that you've been doing it for a little while?
Yeah, I have a few close people. I don't know if I really consider them a mentor in the fullest meaning of what that word means, but I mean, there's a couple treatment providers, mental health and addiction treatment providers that I'm close with, the CEOs that have been in the mental health industry and the addiction industry and the helping industry in general for many, many years. And I think for me to have that relationship with them, to, hey, who can I talk to about this or who can I go to about this, has been a very awesome tool for me to have. They have been
Mm-hmm.
there to, kind of slow me down when I need to be, slowed and quicken me up when I need to get faster. And I think that's a very important tool for all of us to have somebody who isn't just going to agree with everything you say, somebody who will, "Hey, maybe you shouldn't have done that, you idiot." You need that every once in a while. I think you need that friend
Yeah.
or that mentor, or that person in your life that is willing and able to fully do that. But there's
Oh yeah.
yeah, there's probably about 3 or 4 people that I really am pretty close to that have really helped and guide me along the way.
That's it's kind of, I mean, if you could go back in time and talk to yourself there when you the first day that you went into rehab and you could take a snapshot where you're at right now, would you believe yourself that you're sitting there right now?
That's kind of I kind of have 2 answers for that. One is just no, not really, but at the same time when I look back and at myself in rehab, I knew I was determined to get to where I want to go and I still want to get there. And again, I have very crazy ambitions and there's a lot of things and a lot of projects I want to start and grow in crazy ways, but it's amazing. If you would have asked me like 3, 4 years ago, I definitely wouldn't have believed it. But I think, that time of being in jail, I knew if I could take all the energy and all the craziness that I put into obtaining heroin when I was getting dope sick, if I could
Hmm.
take that and put that towards something good, that I would be pretty much well unstoppable. And I think that was the biggest piece was, all right, how do I take this that seems like an evil scumbaggy thing, and how do I make it good? And how am I able to turn that around for something that I want to accomplish and make a difference? And I think
Yeah,
that's a huge role. That's a huge piece of what was kind of motivating me and what helped me move to where I am now.
yeah. And there's a lot of very smart people that end up doing a lot of stupid stuff. Put it that way. They use they use all that smarts and ability to do a lot of stupid stuff and to get in trouble.
Hmm.
Uh, so so it's funny to see how your potential can be used for either good or evil. You know how that balance on which side you go on. You have the same amount of energy and ability, but whatever side you decide to put your that weight on can really affect your life, and it's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's really crazy to think about because most of the time, if you can develop a way to take that negative thing, our darkness, because we all have a dark side. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And if you can find a way to incorporate that with a better part of yourself, I mean, that's what makes you become the person you want to become. It's amazing how that powers you and how that motivates you to change.
Yep, yep. Um, we have a couple minutes left here. And I want to thank you again, Sean, for coming on today and talking with me and everybody that's in here um, today. What's what's your usually your go-to thing when you tell people about your podcast in like a couple of minutes when you meet them? What do you usually say to
Hey, I got a podcast on mental health and addiction. No,
them?
I would, yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know. It's kind of strange how it comes up. So I kind of thinking about like if I'm getting my hair cut and somebody asks you what you do, it's usually how it ends up coming up. Somebody like, oh, what do you do for a living? What are you doing? I don't know if I'd
Right,
say it's for a living yet, but we'll go with that for now. But
right,
and it's weird, because I try to keep that balance of, all right, it's not just about my podcast. I'm not going to go around and just, it's not just about my business. It's about connecting and obviously helping people. So you got to always kind of, at least I always have to be aware of, all right, am I doing this out of selfishness or selflessness? And I try to let that guide where I'm going. And again, I think the universe provides, man. And when you're in a point, somebody's going to ask you, what do you do? What do you have going on in your
right,
life? And it'll happen. It'll come up. And I try not to be forceful with anything. Obviously, you have to promote your business and your company and your podcast or whatever it is you're doing. But it just happens. I don't know. It's tough to explain, I guess.
right. Well, I mean, you also got to look at it too is um, you promoting your podcast is getting people to listen, which ends up helping more people anyway too. So
Absolutely.
it's kind of not just like you're saying, not just you. So you kind of have to look at it a different way for sure. But
Yeah, that was one of my biggest things that I'm probably continually trying to work on is I've stayed quiet a lot and not reached out and promoted, and it's something I've really tried to change over the last handful of months. And just because of, I don't want it to seem like I'm just out for money, or I don't want it to seem like I'm just doing this so people will one day recognize me or whatever it is, because I'm I'm well balanced of an introvert and extrovert, but like
mm,
doing stuff like this takes energy for me. So always
yeah,
socializing, it's not something I'm extremely fond of. I do, I love great conversations, obviously, or else I wouldn't have a podcast, but it can be tiresome for me to
oh,
kind of converse. And so it's not something I always wanted to push out. And it's really just, again, finding a balance of, what am I really doing this for? Why am I doing this? And all right, when should I promote it? When should I not? When is the right time? When isn't? And it's stuff you just kind of learn along the way. Like, maybe I felt kind of, you'll feel it. Again, going back to your gut, you say something, you're gonna feel it, and you'll know in the end
Right.
if you listen to your gut.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. If you do listen to it, um, I want to thank you for being here today. I'm going to play the outro video, and we'll get out of here. And be sure to go check out the Room 9 podcast. The links are right there. I'm going to run on the whole show for his YouTube channel and the podcast website. So go check him out and subscribe to him and stop waiting for life to happen, guys, and make it happen. If I can get my over to my brand over here.
Yeah, Bob. Thanks,
See you
and
later, guys.
thank you for doing what you do, Bob. This is
Oh
great.
yeah, no problem. No problem.